time for some leaves. In fact, quite a number of leaves. And when I was trying to decide how to or what to do for these leaves, I knew that I wanted them to be solid colors, a solid fill as opposed to like an outline shape because I didn't want the gray to show through. But I knew that we had already done this leaf, which was pretty time intensive, which I love it. But I didn't want to do necessarily fill in every single leaf. There's 10 leaves on this design, and I didn't want to have to fill in every single one with stitching. So what is the best plan for that? Felt to the rescue. And I love working with wool felt. This is not a surprise to some of you. And felt is a great way to fill in areas. It gives texture. It's soft, but it's raised off the fabric a little bit. Felt is just, it has so many uses. I will never stop finding ways to use felt. So before we get going, let me show you about an easy and accurate way to cut out your felt shapes. Okay, felt. Anytime I say felt, what I mean is wool felt. And there is felt that you can buy at craft stores that is probably not wool felt. It's probably going to be acrylic felt or craft felt. And, it'll work, but it's thin and it doesn't have the pretty colors necessarily, and it's kind of plasticky. Definitely, if you can spring for wool felt, go for it. It's a little bit more expensive, but you will not regret it. It's wonderful to work with. I get all my felt from Benzie Design, and they are great. They have beautiful colors. The quality is great. Renee and her entire team is wonderful to work with. So I definitely, highly, highly recommend wool felt, no matter what. All right, but the only thing about it is that it's hard to, you can't see through it, obviously, and it is not the easiest to draw on it. To get your patterns cut out of wool felt, I really like for my designs, my shapes that I'm cutting out to be accurate. And so you could definitely just print out the pattern and, cut out the shape and lay it on the felt, and you could trace around it with, this is the Frixion or a pencil or maybe a little fine Sharpie. But because it's a fibrous, it's fibers that are pressed together, the any pencil or anything is going to sort of catch on those fibers. So it's a little bit tricky and probably not as accurate because you're tracing around on a surface, you're tracing around a design, which is not always that accurate. So what you can do is you can print out your designs onto label paper. This is like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of label paper, just, a solid sheet. You could, just depends. I mean, you can maybe figure out how to do it on those small labels, but I just buy the 8.5 by 11 sheets. You could also, as an alternative, you could print it out on regular copy paper and you could spray the back of say this is your design, you could spray the back of it with a spray adhesive. Elmer's Craft Bond is an excellent one. Just spray a light coating of spray adhesive on the back of your printed pattern. Then you're going to want to cut around the shape, leave a little bit of white, and then stick it onto your felt. And that adhesive, that spray adhesive, has just enough stickiness to it to stick on there long enough for you to cut out the patterns. What I've done here is I've printed them out onto the label paper. And like I said, when you cut them out, leave some white space around the design. I have stuck it on to the felt. But wait, if you're going to use the label paper, before you do that, there's something very important you need to do. You need to get rid of some of the stickiness that's on the back of the label paper, because if you just put it right on the felt and then when you come to peel it off, especially if you have a little very small shape, it will peel away and leave lots of fuzzy, the felt will be very fuzzy and sometimes the edges get fuzzy. If you have a little tiny itty bitty delicate piece, it can tear that piece. So let's just say, here, I'll draw a shape on here. Let's say this is my shape. So here's my shape. It's on my label paper. I'm going to peel away the back. And now here's the sticky side. But before I stick it onto the felt, I am going to, honestly, jeans work great. The inside of a sweatshirt, If you have a scrap piece of felt, like a section of felt that you've already cut out, and don't use a nice brand new piece of felt. But if I have an old weird color of felt that I'm never going to use, so I will take it. But generally, honestly, I just use my blue jeans or my sweatshirt, inside of my sweatshirt. Take it and stick it on, and repeatedly stick it on and pull it up. So I'm going to do that on my jeans here, so you can't really see what I'm doing. But what you're trying to do is to reduce that stickiness, how sticky it is on the back, because the adhesive on the back of this is pretty strong. So hopefully you can see. So see how I've stuck it on my jeans and it's got like blue lint all over the back of it? That is making it so it's not so sticky. So now when I stick this onto my felt and cut it out, when I come to peel it away, it will not, I mean, it's going to leave the felt a little bit fuzzy, but it's not going to be as fuzzy as if I had not done that. So here's a piece that I've already done that to. I've stuck it on the felt. It's time to cut it out. I've got these are some small detail scissors. They work great. I mean, these shapes are not intricate, so you could use bigger scissors too. I always cut right outside the edge, or the outline, the printed line. I'm just consistent that way. Every time I cut out a shape, I always cut it out right along the outside edge. All right, so there's that. And so now it's time to peel off this sticky paper. And so you got to be, this is a very sturdy shape. Like I said, I've done like flower petals where the little petals are pretty delicate. You have to be careful. Sometimes it's a little hard to get that stickiness off. So, I mean, get that label paper going without. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a needle and kind of just gently work. See that? Once you get it going, then you can kind of get a grip on it. Now, the other thing is you don't want to just rip it as fast as, as hard as you can, because it, like I said, it's going to pull some of this fuzz off of the felt, and you want to try to preserve that felt as much as possible. So pull it slowly. All right. Throw that away, obviously. And you can see that it's not too fuzzy. Sometimes some colors seem to fuzz up more than others. I think they're softer. It has something to do with the dyeing process. If it's really fuzzy here on the end, I'll take my scissors and I'm not trimming the actual felt. What I'm doing is I'm holding the scissors like, right up close to the felt, but I'm just kind of shaving off. You see the fuzzies that are on my scissors right there? Not really. Anyway, this one is not very fuzzy at all. Sometimes there's like a whole lot of fuzz left over, and I just want to clean those edges up. So I'll just trim that off. You have felt fuzz everywhere, and there you go. There's your felt shape. Now that each leaf is cut out of the felt, let's stitch them onto the hoop. So make sure you take a look at the color chart, because there actually is a specific leaf that goes, not all of these are the exact same size. So look at the color chart. I have each one labeled with a number, and then on the pattern it tells you where to put which one. So as you're cutting them out of the felt, just keep track of which number is what. So let's start out with this one, and to start I am using 2 strands for this first stitching that we're going to do. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to attach each leaf with just some simple back stitching, and then I'm going to come back around that stitching and do some couching with a different thread, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So first thing, I have started with 2 strands, and color-wise for these stems, I just picked some random color. Whatever needle I reached over there and had 2 strands on it of either a blue or a green. So it doesn't really matter because it's going to be slightly covered up, but the color of this first stem is not that critical, so just pick a color you like, any of the blues or greens. And I'm just back stitching with 2 strands up this leaf, or up the stem. So now it's time to go on to the leaf. Now, All we're going to be doing is stitching a very simple line down the center and 4 lines for the stems. And you can just eye this as you go. You can just wing it. That's fine. No problem there. Just stitch up. But if you're like me, raise your hand if you like to have a little line to follow this curve. You can use a pen. This is a Frixion pen. It's going to be covered up anyway, so you don't have to worry about it fading, having to take the lines out. You can use a pencil. I just wouldn't make it a very thick line, but I have just very. It's a little bit hard to draw on felt, and doesn't. You just need a very faint line to sort of show you generally the curve. But honestly, like I said, if you just want to wing it and just stitch that line up the center of the leaf, not a big deal. So anyway, but yes, count me in the group that likes to have a line to follow. But just stitch that back stitch up the center of the leaf. These back stitches don't have to be short. They can be fairly long. Just hold that felt in place so it doesn't shift as you're stitching. And I have said before that even though backstitch is one of the most basic stitches, it's not always the easiest to get it accurate. But as I said, this is going to be slightly covered up, so you don't have to obsess about it too much. All right, so there's the center. And now I'm going to come, and now I can really truly just eye this. I'm going to make a vein on this side at an angle, and one on this side, and a matching one on this side and that side. So I just make one big stitch. Make sure you go at enough of an angle. You don't want it to be like, straight like that. Go ahead and come down at a pretty good angle. Do one on the other side that kind of matches. Hop down. Make one over here. And as far as how close to the edge to come fairly close, but you don't want to go over the edge because we're going to be stitching around each of these stitches. So leave yourself a little bit of room here on the edge. So don't take this vein, this stitch, all the way to the very, very edge. Give yourself just a teeny bit of room right there. So that's that leaf stitched. And what I want to do is go ahead and stitch all of the leaves. I'm going to use a different color of felt for each leaf, and then a different color of 2 strands of thread for each stem and vein. So like if this one I'm going to come down, I'm going to use the same color for this stem, different color of blue or green on this one, come down and make that stem a different color. So go ahead, do this part for each. Oh, what's going on there? Go do each leaf, so each stem and veins, and attach each felt leaf before we move on to the next section. So all of the felt leaves are sewn on, stitched on now, and they look fine like that. You could leave them like that. They look like leaves, pretty colors, that's great. But I wanted to do something a little bit extra. And so what we're going to do is we're going to couch around each of these lines with one of my favorite colors of thread. I've taken it out of the skein, but this is a pearl. This is DMC pearl thread, so that's why it has that kind of ropey texture, and it's one of my favorite colors. It's number 4050. I think the name of it is like Roaming Pastures, which sounds really cool anyway, but it's this really pretty blues and greens and aquas, or just aqua and kind of a yellow green, really gorgeous. And so obviously it's variegated, and this is a good example of when it's really fun to use variegated threads, because we're going to do one long unbroken line going around each stitched line, and so it really shows off the variegation in the colors really well. So if you're not familiar with pearl thread, it is not the same as the stranded thread that we have been using. You do not separate this, so you just use it just like it comes out of the skein, just like this. It has that kind of silky, ropey texture. It does require a needle that has a big enough eye to get it through. So if you have a teeny tiny eye in your needle, it's going to be difficult or impossible to get this through. But it's very, like I said, it's very silky, so it's not too much of a problem. And we are going to be couching it. And couching, if you've not done couching before, really is just having a a surface thread, and a couching thread. So those are the two terms I'm going to be using. And you can couch all sorts of things. You could have your couching thread be big thick yarn, or two strands of stranded thread, or I mean, there's so many opportunities for couching, and I love couching. It's great for outlining because it gives you a nice smooth line. But we're going to use this one. So this is the couching, sorry, this is the surface thread. And then to couch this, which just means we're going to be stitching little stitches across the, over the top of this thread to hold it in place where we want it, I'm going to be using one strand of the DMC stranded. Um, so I have my pearl thread on a needle that has a big enough eye. And to start out couching, start down here. Oops, I'm going to split that thread. So I'm going to start right down here. Doesn't matter if you start on the one side of the line or the other side of the line. It doesn't matter. Just come up on one side of. All right, why won't you go through? What's going on? All right, I have some sort of knot. Let me go figure that out. Well, that was a first for me. For some reason, I had a knot in both this end and the other end. So I've never had that happen. I don't even know how that happened to me. But anyway, I fixed it now. So I have come up on one side of this backstitched line. And so I actually can take this off of the needle because I'm not going to be going down with this needle for a while. So now I just have this. You're really just going to come up one time. And then now I just have this thread loose with no needle on it. And now I'm going to get, it does not matter what color of couching thread you use. Oh, and I thought I had one ready, and I don't have one ready. All right, let me go do that. Wait a minute, I do have this one. I'll just use blue, okay? I have this thread, this blue thread, one strand. I'm just going to use that as my couching thread. Same thing as these stems. Use the 40/50 for the surface thread, and it doesn't matter. Just pick a blue or a green for each of these ones. It just doesn't matter because you're going to see it a little bit, but we're using blues and greens for all of these stems. So anyway, this is what I have on a needle. This is the one I'm going to use. So now I am going to use this hand to guide where this thread is going, and I'm going to come up. I'm going to lay this thread down where I want it, and I'm going to come up right next to where I want that thread to be secured. And I'm going to come up to the next place. All I'm doing is, let me zoom in. Okay, get back my needle. Okay, so now I am, those two stitches are pretty close together, but it doesn't matter. So now I'm going to follow the line of this stem, this one right here. I'm going to go up and put that pearl thread right next to that green backstitched line. And when you are couching, just, very slight curves or straight lines, you don't have to put those couching stitches very close together. You just want that surface thread to stay in its place. But what you do want to do is every time you come to any kind of a corner or a curve, someplace you need to anchor, like you're going to change directions, like I'm coming up to this spot right here, I'm going to go here, and then it's going to head out this way and go around and up. So I'm going to make sure I always put a stitch right where I want the thread to change positions. So I can hold that out of the way. I'm going to come up right at that little corner. And now put the thread down on the other side. And so now that will hold that thread. I'm tugging on the back side of that couching thread. And now I can move this. And now I can move it over here and change directions. If I didn't have a stitch there, the thread would go over that way. But once I pull that tight and move it this way, sorry, trying to keep my hand out of the way. And so now I can head along this stitch. So I don't really need to couch anything on the side. All I really need to do now is come up here to the tip of that vein like that and go over my couching thread. And that's going to hold that there. And now I'm going to curve around this way, and I'm going to come down and I'm going to secure it right here again, because that's where I'm changing directions. And that's that first little vein. Now, when I am making a really drastic change in direction, I'm on the back side of the hoop, I am pulling on the blue couching thread. I'm pulling on it really tightly, so when I change directions and tug on this to get it straight, it doesn't do that. If I wasn't holding on to the back, it would get loose like that. But if I pull on that blue thread and then hold it up that way, and I will move up to the next little corner I'm going to make. It also doesn't matter if you, like I'm going to come up here, I could come up on this side of the thread and go over that way, or I could come up on this side of the thread, the couching, the surface thread, and come here. It just doesn't matter. You just want that couching thread to just capture the surface thread. So sometimes we're kind of covering up that green, the stitching, the back stitching that we did first. So it, you don't want to completely cover it up. I mean, if it does, it's fine. But so if you're able, keep this purl thread maybe just slightly next to, but not right on top of. Now see, that's really right on top of the green thread. That's fine. I'm going to hold that blue thread, come down at a curve. Come out to the end of the vein. So this is when it is helpful to have your hoop in a stand or put it on a desk maybe, so that you can lay it down and so that you've got two hands. So you can have this hand directing the direction, changing the direction of this thread, and you can have this hand with the needle in it for your couching thread. It's a little bit hard to hold the hoop with one hand and then you're trying to couch with, one hand. It's really easiest to have two hands available to do your couching. So let me get to the end of this leaf, back around. To here. And now I'm going to go back down the stem on the other side of that green back stitching that we did. I've got this little sharp corner to make, so I want to put a nice tight thread right there, and now I'm again pulling on the back, and I'm going to head up this direction. So now I think you can see why we went ahead and we attached all of the leaves, because assuming you have enough of this purl thread, you can just make one unbroken line. Let me zoom back out for you a little bit. You could make one unbroken line all the way around here, up this stem, around these veins, down this side, up here, around these, here, around this leaf, and all the way back. And the next time you would need to put this couching thread back down would be right here. I may or may not have enough of this pearl thread to go all the way around all these leaves. It's hard to tell. If I run out of thread, then just you know thread this. Whether you come to the end or you need to start a new thread, put this back on a needle, put it down in your thread wherever you end up, and take it to the back and finish it off just like you would any other thread. So anyway, that's all you have to do for these leaves. It's a really interesting effect. I love the color as it shows up, the variegated color as it shows up. So just work around all of those veins with your couching thread and your surface thread.